The speaker for paper 2 is a teacher who has a wide range of experience, both in teaching and even marking this paper. He's also a senior examiner of paper 2. So I would like to invite Mr. Stephen Njoroge. Please let's have the people who are outside coming in. Mr. Njoroge.
Thank you very much, Madam Ucham. And thank you for the invitation to attend this meeting. I am honored and privileged to stand before you, ladies and gentlemen. You people are very important people. I'll begin by saying that because the role you people play in this nation is vital. I don't have the words to fully express that. We are the people who shape. We are the people who move things. We are the people who shape generations. We are the people who have in our hands the future of this country. We are not ordinary people. No. And in fact, if they realized it, we would be the VIPs in this country. It is us who would be paid top dollar for the services that we offer. And that is very clear in the scriptures. That is why there are these two verses that I have picked. And they are just here to remind us about the vital task that we have to play. So we have a lot of work to do, and we have generations that we need to shape. So the work that we do is very important. That cannot be overemphasized. It would be better to be thrown into the sea if you are to make somebody, one of those children we have in our hands, to stumble. Now, we have begun on scriptural note. And now let us delve straight into English paper 2. And I'll try very much to tell you that which you probably didn't know. And if you find me repeating something that you already know, consider it as an emphasis. Consider it as something that I want to stress. In the interest of time, I'll try to do that as much as possible so that we can move with speed. This is what we expect in English paper 2. These we already know. However, there is a trend that I've seen with my students and possibly with yours, that the minute that this paper is placed on their desk, they immediately flip the pages and go to the last page. They go to the grammar questions. Well, tell them that there is a reason why the Kenya National Exams Council has ordered the questions in the way that it has. And they must follow that order as much as possible. The comprehension question number 1, requires them to be alert. It is an unseen text. It is lengthy. It requires a student who is fresh. That is why it is question number 1. That is the one they need to tackle first. The second one, though larger, is seen. It is just a part of the set book. So they have already seen it, probably doesn't need so much concentration. Now, as the concentration wanes, they get to question number 3. Question number 3, when it's a poem, it is brief. It is verse, it is short. Therefore, they don't need to concentrate so much. And even if it is an oral narrative, it is more or less recreational. So the last question, the grammar question, the kids are exhausted. And that is where the grammar question, apart from the rewrites where they write a full sentence, the rest are just blank spaces requiring one-word answers, prepositions, small words. So you see, that is why the council has ordered it in that way. So let them not move about. And then the risk involved is also serious, because should time run out when that student is tackling the last question as it ought to be, then it is easy to rush through the grammar questions. They can read the instructions fast and probably write the answers very fast, which is not the case if they left the extract for last. Then that becomes a problem, because that now needs this question, and you need to refer to the excerpt. So advise the students to follow that order as much as possible. The average score in this exam of ours is 22 out of 80. I wonder why. That is the reason why we are here, ladies and gentlemen. We want to talk and see how it is that we can assist these students of ours to score higher grades. And I tell you, this is the easiest paper to score high marks. It is the paper that has the highest number of marks, 80 marks, yet it is one of those that are performed very poorly. Maybe not as poorly as paper 3, but still not good enough. So I believe that we need to teach comprehension purposefully. This is probably where we make the blunder. The blunder of teaching comprehension through assignment. This is the question that you are going to find easiest to go to class with, especially when you have arrived late to school. Happens with me once in a while. I try, but then, it is the one that you will grab and run to class with, and you will survive a lesson. However, it is the most important. That is why you must take your time to teach comprehension. Because even in this year, maybe, we don't know, if they bring an oral narratives are also about comprehension. So, the first 3 questions are comprehension. That is how important it is. We must teach it purposefully. That is the first point I want to emphasize. That that way we are going to avoid the blank spaces that we keep seeing in the scripts that our students hand in for marking. Let us teach comprehension. Let us do that. And we can use the passages. Luckily, we have them in the course books. They are not in short supply. We can use them to teach. And then we pick on those ones that you need to teach a certain point. Pick them deliberately. Don't just pick the book. You need to go through them beforehand so that you can see the skills to teach from each. Give the assignment depending on the skill you want to emphasize. Once you have identified that skill is tested in a particular comprehension passage. That is very important. We will not have blank spaces, and comprehension is going to score. That is the question that actually saves the candidates in English paper 2. Question number 1. It is the one that has a higher score than the others. So if we emphasize that, if we taught very well, then it is possible to score quite highly in English paper 2, depending on how we do it in question 1. Kindly let us remember that. It is important to use the same words in the passage to write the answer, unless asked to do so. This is a mistake that candidates make when they want to impress the examiner. So what they do is, when they are writing the answer, they see that this is the answer from the text, from the passage. And then as they are writing their answer, they want to use different words in order to make an impression on the examiner. That is very dangerous and must be avoided at all costs, because the marking scheme is in those particular words that are in the passage. The marking scheme is in those words. Therefore, these are the words that the examiner has crammed, has to remember. And the examiner puts the marking scheme aside and then starts marking, and at high speed. So there is little time to consider whether this word means the same as this word, because you are moving very fast. Let us remember that. And there is this last point in this slide that says, if you can't find the exact answer, write the sentence which you think contains the answer. That is what we do as the last resort. Rather than leave a space blank, it is better for the candidate to pick a sentence which he or she suspects could contain the answer and write it there as the answer instead of leaving a blank space. The maths people will tell you that the probability of a blank space scoring any mark is 0. But the probability of something written in a space scoring something is 1. There is a possibility. But a blank space can never score anything. Discourage it at all costs. Let us expect higher order questions. This is to say that we are moving away from copy and paste, and that this is becoming less common. We need to practice so that we get these sorts of questions that require a candidate to think a little rather than to copy paste. That is getting outdated. These are the kinds of questions that are being asked these days in the comprehension, and they have to do with higher order rather than copy paste. We have them in the course books. Practice them. Train your candidates now to think a little, because these are the kinds of questions that are coming these days. And as we move along, I'll encourage you, if you're able to take a photo. It will enable us to move faster. Let me remind you about words in quotes. They have been tested for some years, and we need to train our candidates in case this is repeated. Like Mr. Likuyani said, KNEC is fond of repeating questions. So this is a possibility, that when you have words in quotes, such as explain why the author has put the word civilization between quotation marks. 2 marks. You need first of all to say that it is ironically used or sarcastically used. You score 1 mark for saying that. And then give an explanation that civilization is supposed to build rather than destroy. That is why it is in quotes. Such a question has been tested several times, and I wanted us to get through with it. I'd like to say something about summary. And summary is also tested quite often. Kindly remind your candidates that when they are asked to make notes, that is how the question is going to be phrased, in note form, in point form, or to list. They must use either a dash numbering, letters, and other methods there. But remind them that there is no limit. There is no limit of words to use when you're asked to make notes. That this question, you have the opportunity to write those answers that you are not sure of. You suspect may be correct, but are not sure. The candidate ought to just write write the next number and write the next question, the next answer. The next number, the next answer. On and on. Write as much as possible, and that is where the marks are. The examiner will pick the correct answers and leave the rest. Prose summary. We identify these questions because there will be a limit of words now, and there could be some space that has been left for rough and neat copy, and that this is the summary that we need to use a paragraph. There are serious penalties here that we must avoid, and that is why we are talking about summary. These penalties about making notes. You're asked to write in a certain number of words, but instead you make notes. Your marks are divided by 2. The answers are marked normally. They are just marked, but then the total mark is divided by 2. That is a severe penalty, because in a summary, like we had one of 10 marks, and they make that blunder, and they are sharp students. They score 10, but they are divided by 2. You lose a whole 5 marks. That is very severe. So the other penalty, using prose instead of notes, you are deducted a half a mark from the total. There are those 2 distinctions. When you make notes instead of prose, it is assumed that you are avoiding writing a paragraph, which is more work. Writing a paragraph is more work than just numbering the answers. So the penalty is bigger. That is when the marks are multiplied by half. But when you're asked to write in prose, you're asked to write in notes, but you use prose, you are doing more work. So the penalty is not as severe, just half a mark is deducted from the total. Let's train them to use complete sentences in this one question, the prose summary, because of that penalty of minus a quarter a mark for every sentence containing a correct answer but has got a grammatical error. There is a deduction of a quarter a mark, the popular glimmer that you hear of. So let us train our students to know the difference in the wording, in the way in which the question is phrased. There's a difference. The words that are above the red line, in about 50 words, about is an approximation. In approximately 70 words, the candidate can use plus 5 words on top of the 50 and use a maximum of 55 or a maximum of 75 respectively. But when the question says in not more than, now this is definite. This is definite. It is an exact number. So here it says in not more than 80 words. Then in that case, 80 is the maximum. And any additional words are ignored without exceeding 40 words. This is important for the candidates to know because the 5 extra words can contain an answer or even 2 or even 3. So it is important that they know that, so that as they are reading, they can use those words to their advantage. Exceeding the number of words doesn't help because the words are counted. That is the first rule. That when we get to the question on summary, prose summary, the first thing you do is count the words, one after the other. When you get to the limit, you put 2 parallel lines to show you that that's where the limit is. And then you go back to the beginning, mark normally, but when you get to those 2 parallel lines where the limit of words reaches, you don't mark beyond that point. You don't mark beyond that point. So there is no need, there is no point of using extra words. Teach them to use the exact words, and because any extra words, it's a waste of time and ink. Do not give a title. It is counted as part of your summary. No need for a title. Punctuation marks are not counted as words. I've been asked that often. Words with a hyphen are one word, for example, follow up. And finally, ensure your candidates can tell the difference between notes and prose. That is the most important thing about summary. Let them differentiate between those two and avoid those severe penalties that are associated with summary. Again, use the same words because the marking scheme will be in those words. Now, I want us to beware of the test in the question. This summary question usually carries a test that the candidate needs to pass. They must be aware of that test. For example, in 2021, there was this question, said, in about 65 words, summarize how the way Mandela is treated stands out from how other prisoners are treated. 6 marks. This question was tricky because of the stands out from. That is contrast. And the candidates were expected to know that they are supposed to show contrast. Contrast between how Mandela as a prisoner is treated and how that is different from the way the other prisoners are treated. So if the candidate did not bring out the contrast, they scored a straight 0. And contrast is brought out by a contrasting word. So the first thing we would do is to look for that word. But yet, all those words that you know of, if the word isn't there, then there is no contrast, and therefore no mark whatsoever. We don't have to suffer when physics is suffering, and the maths, and the others. No. We cannot suffer the same fate. And ours is a language, for God's sake. It's not facts and algebra and all the others. You see, it's a language. Let us do our best. That is very important. Let's not punish our kids in English and Kiswahili and also in maths and chem. They need to find a way out. Otherwise, that's why they are not coming to school. There is nothing to bring them to school. But they can think that, English, wacha niende tu leo, wacha niende tu. Because they are looking forward to your lesson. So, KNEC concentrates on these ones because it wants to accommodate even all the candidates, all of them. That's why they'll test metaphor personification. They don't want mass failures either. KNEC may be the referee, but even the referee does not want mass failures because in the blame game, he too is going to feature. So that is the essence of that table, so that as we teach, let us specify, let us emphasize on those areas kindly. Now I'd like us to go through those areas one after the other and mention a few things. First of all, imagery, figurative language, figures of speech, images, refers to mostly those four stylistic devices. Therefore, there are other figures of speech. They are there, very many. But questions in the KCSE are going to have these ones as the answers. Whichever question is set and they ask for imagery, figures of speech, train your candidates to look for those four first. They are going to find them. They are going to find them right there. Remember ellipses now that we are expecting a doll's house as the excerpt. Show them what ellipses is. That's free marks. Should they be asked to just identify style, they'll have ellipses. Ellipses scores marks directly. And it is in the play, it is shown by a dash. In other plays, it is shown by 3 dots. But in this play, it is shown by a dash. For example, come, that dash is the ellipses. Teach ellipses in anticipation of that question on style in October. It is a very common stylistic device, and it is free marks. Please let them know what ellipsis is. Irony is very important in KNEC. Irony is very important in KNEC exams. And in 2021, irony was the only stylistic device that was tested in 2021, and it catered for 8 whole marks. The only stylistic device to be tested in 8 marks. Who and to those who didn't know what irony is, they missed out on those 8 marks directly. Ensure that your candidates know what irony is. It is very important. And remind them this, that the irony cannot refer to information outside the extract. Both sides of the irony must come from within the excerpt. That's a rule. The candidates must use a connector of contrast. Must use a connector of contrast. If not, the answer is wrong. Rationale, irony is contrast, and you can never bring out contrast without a contrasting word or phrase. So, I also advise that we train our candidates not just to use the contrasting word or phrase, but to also underline it. Please don't forget that. Tell them to use it and underline the contrasting word. Reason being that in the marking, the rule is the contrasting word must be there. So you're underlining the contrasting word to show the examiner, this is where it is. I know you are looking for this word, here it is. You get your marks straight. Because remember, in the high speed of marking, an examiner may miss it. It's possible. He or she is a human being. Can miss a small word like yet, and you miss out on the marks. You see? If not that, because of fatigue, the long hours of marking, the same can happen. That the examiner misses that word. Tell them to use and underline so that they score that mark. I'd like us to see how these questions in style are phrased. The first sentence there, first question says, identify and illustrate 2 stylistic devices used in the excerpt. 4 marks. This was a question in 2019. When the question says identify and illustrate, and says 2, identification is 1 mark, and then illustration 1 mark. In order to score for any 2 devices, you score the 4 marks that are in the question there. So that is the most common way of marking that question. You're told to identify and illustrate 2 for 4 marks. That's how it goes. However, in 2020, we had 2 questions of that nature. The second one, identify and illustrate 4 features of style now. In this excerpt, 4 marks. 4, ordinarily, 4 stylistic devices ought to have 8 marks. But now there are 4 stylistic devices for 4 marks. So in that case, we tick 1 for both the identification and the illustration. That is repeating itself. And what does it tell us? It tells us to give as many answers as possible. And that is the greatest distinction between English paper 1 and English paper 2. But in English paper 2, we allow the candidate to write as many answers as they can. And in our marking, even when we have asked for 2, we keep marking until you have the maximum 4 marks, if that's what you're looking for, or the maximum 6. So unlike the paper 1 who draw a line when they have asked for 1, they draw a line and mark the first 1 answer only. For us, we keep marking. First answer is wrong, it's wrong. Second wrong, wrong. Third wrong. But the 4th and 5th, 6th, 7th could be correct. We award the marks, as is as is necessary. So that is the trick of this paper. Friends, tell your candidates to fill that paper with writing, with answers. Let them write as many answers as they possibly can. That is where the answers, the marks are, in giving many answers. Because we'll keep marking until we get the maximum for that question. The third bullet, identify and explain the use of any to. To, identify and explain the use of. Now this is different. Identify and explain the use of any two poetic devices in this poem, 6 marks. 2, yet they are giving 6 marks. So this is where we realize that we need the effectiveness. So that 1 mark for identification of the device, 1 mark for the example, 1 mark for the effectiveness for any 2 devices. Again, it is any 2, any. Meaning they write 6. We'll keep marking and look for any 2 that have those 3 marks each. On the same note, alliteration, assonance, consonance, rhyme are correct answers in poetry in paper 2. Former speaker talked about that. So, unlike was believed earlier, that these ones cannot be identified in paper 2. When the question asks for any stylistic devices in a poem or a song, it is very okay to identify and illustrate alliteration, assonance, consonance, rhyme, and to underline. You must still underline the sound. Avoid the slashes. Tell them to avoid the slashes. Let them underline. That's the basic way of answering this question. Like the former speaker said, in alliteration, the words are either next to one another or near one another. How near? 2 words maximum. 2 words maximum between this word and the next. When there are 3 words between, then that's too far. That's too far. We need 2 words maximum between for it to be alliteration and the other sound patterns. So please train your students to know what alliteration, assonance, consonants are, because they are, again, very easy to identify and illustrate. And they'll score that question on style very well, because they are fairly easy stylistic devices. There are no half marks in the entire English paper 2. That is why it is only 1 mark for identification and illustration, etc. These are the kinds of answers that are expected. In that question that was in the previous slide, identify and explain the use of any 2 poetic devices in the poem, 6 marks. 1 mark for identifying, for example, metaphor. The other mark for the example, the other mark for the effect. And those are the kinds of effects that are awarded marks in the Kenya National Exams Council marking scheme. Those ones. Notice that rhyme, you must get rid of and. Don't use and. Don't have the 2 rhyming words as smears and fears. And is going to ruin that answer. It's going to be wrong. Train your students also as far as repetition is concerned to look for 2 or more words that are repeated. There are times when the council refuses to give any mark for 1 word as the illustration for repetition. So train them to look for at least 2 or more words that are repeated instead of just 1, so that they are guaranteed the marks. These are simple enough stylistic devices, and they are the most common stylistic devices in this paper. So we can score high marks in this paper, I tell you. character. It doesn't matter the word that is used to phrase the question in character. It doesn't matter. Whether it is comment, outline, identify, explain, discuss, describe, state, give, as long as the question is on the character of Nora, for example, and it is from the extract, then you must identify the trait first and then illustrate. The illustration can be in the form of a quote, so that you quote directly, you lift the illustration as it is from the poem or from the extract, and then that suffices as an illustration. It is enough. If not that, you can have an illustration in the form of an explanation. You can explain rather than quote. But any of those suffices as an illustration. So let the candidates identify and illustrate. Identify and then quote. Identify and then quote. As many character traits as possible. Again, we'll keep marking until we get the maximum that we need for that question. Because of that, candidates are allowed to use any space, any free space in that paper. Any. Yes. That is because they are not responsible for their big handwritings. And the space that has been left in the question is not sufficient. And we have told them to write as many answers as possible. So a candidate, should they feel that the space is not enough, they are free to use any space in that paper, as long as they number the question. Most prefer to use arrows, and I don't mind. And I must follow that arrow to its destination. Those are the rules. I don't have a choice. Should it be in page 1, and the arrow takes me all the way, I'll be just following that arrow until the last page here. Most of them will say here, when they mean here. Just write here. That is the indication you have arrived. Now you mark. So you see, that is because KNEC just wants answers. And because of economy, it may not have all the space that is required. The paper may have to be very long in these tough economic times. And there is a candidate who fills one line with 3 words. Big handwriting. 1 line, 3 words. How much space is that person going? He is not to blame. It is KNEC who is to blame. So they are allowed to use even this page, the back page, as long as they number. I'm telling you, if I find an answer here on this page, I have to read it. This first page. So you see, let them write. They don't have an excuse about where. Teacher, ona, sasa ningeandika wapi, ona. Let them use any free space in that paper in order that they can score as much as possible. Spelling, candidates are allowed to misspell the names of characters in the excerpt. It's allowed because it's assumed. This fellow is talking about the Nora that we know, so he leaves out the A, it's okay. But they are not allowed to do the same in the other questions. For example, the oral narrative. If the character's name is Karia, they write Kariara. That's a factual error. It's not correct. It's wrong. It's wrong. But in the excerpt, it's allowed. They are allowed to misspell in these other areas as long as the wrong spelling does not create a new word. That's the rule. If the wrong spelling does not create a new word, and you can see this is something like simile, they like that one, it's allowed. This word looks like metaphor. You can tell it's metaphor he wanted to write. Give the mark, and then look for the illustration. However, should simile become smile, that's a factual error. It is wrong. cannot score. Same with lose. That one is a big problem. Same as sack, that one about tests, and that other one. So spelling, that is how it is. Some more on character is about gender, the gender. This is an area that is costing candidates many, many marks when they confuse the gender of their character. If they can't tell them apart, if viewers cannot tell them apart, tell them not to use them. If viewers are like mine, you say his husband, her wife. I have tried very much and I have almost failed. Not yet, but I've almost. So I tell them to say the wife. The wife. We know it's an illustration. The wife of this character, we know that one. If her is going to be a problem, let it be the wife. Or write the name again and again. The many times you have to write that name of that character. Rather than his husband, and her wife. It is possible in this world, kwa sababu ilitoboka kitambo hii dunia. Sasa it is possible to have his husband and her wife. But we don't have those in our set books. So they don't apply here. That is a very serious offense. It constitutes a factual error. And it is wrong if you confuse the gender, if you use the wrong pronoun. Do not stroke any answers in this paper. This was prominent last year and part of this year in the 2022 exam. And this is something you must take home. It is now very dangerous to stroke answers. Candidate wants to give a character trait that so-and-so is hardworking and wants to stroke that with supportive. I don't go beyond that. I don't look for anything else. I cross at supportive. Because the stroke means that those two words have the same meaning. And it's not true. Hardworking and supportive are not the same. So the best way to avoid that blunder is to avoid stroking. And maybe we'll have to do the same ourselves as we give notes to avoid the stroking, because that is where they copy from. And as we tell them, write many answers, they'll stroke them. That's very dangerous. Because it is considered to mean one and the same things. So should there be so let them know, caring, persuasive, and all the others, what they mean, and to look for these ones in the excerpt, in the oral narrative, and they have that answer. They have those full marks without a sweat. Let them learn these words. They can pick one every day. And I have stroked them. I have stroked them to show that those I have stroked with are synonyms. They are synonyms of the same adjective. So remind them also that caring takes care of loving, takes care of concerned, of considerate, of affectionate. So that idea is taken care of. They cannot identify loving and then identify and illustrate, and then identify concerned and illustrate, and assume that they have three answers. That is considered to be one answer. The way in which I have stroked them. They are synonymous and therefore cannot be different answers. Kindly let them learn these, show them how to pick those answers, and these are not tough words, the ones in red especially. Right? Another common question is the role of a character, and as far as the role is concerned, this is also quite easy. Because the role of a character is given in terms of the areas that we analyze a set book in terms of theme, style, plot, character. So when they asked the role of a character, like they were asked in 2019, then they must give the role in terms of the themes that that character helps to bring out, and mention the particular theme. Pick just one. So that you have theme of family, brings out the theme of family. But if they just give theme, character brings out themes. That is wrong. The candidate must give both the role, for example, theme, and the example of a theme that is brought out. Same case with style. Mention style and the stylistic device, plot and the part that is brought out, character and the character trait that is brought out. Those two must come out in order for the candidate to score the marks on roll. It's a common question. Kindly teach that. Plot. These are the common ways in which this question is asked. And there is that issue of placing the extract in its immediate context. There is the before and there is the after. And as far as that is concerned, KNEC does not mind. This is between you and me, whether they have written before or after. They may not. For us, they must. But for KNEC, if they don't write before, if they don't write after, in that question at the end there, we look for the answers for them. It will be up to us, the examiners, to identify this answer is for before, give the mark. It doesn't matter whether they have written before or after. It is up to us. But of course, we will encourage them to do the right thing.